Cool. Again, the point of these lessons, and it's not just limited to the 4 we've studied today, but the point of these lessons, of all these signs and miracles and wonders that Jesus did, not just in the Gospel of John, in all the Gospels, they're supposed to teach us something. And supposed to teach us something about who Jesus is and our relationship with him. Mark 5 probably strikes home to me the most. And I'm going to talk for a few minutes just about me, since I just kind of showed up and taught some lessons and y'all know a ton about me. I'm going to give a little bit of background. All right, so you know my name. It's Bill. So I'm from New York City. My dad had 27 children with 7 different women. He was not a Christian. He's passed away. My mom is not a Christian either. She is what I would call a practicing atheist. And by that I mean she is Catholic by name, but not by action. I didn't grow up in a house where sin was okay. Sin was expected. This is what I mean by sin was expected. I remember being 14, recently converted, and having my older siblings laugh at me because I wouldn't drink alcohol. I remember trying to study my Bible at home, and my mom telling me, "What are you doing? Don't be a Bible thumper. Don't be like, it's okay to do it every now and then, but don't be a fanatic. Those people are crazy. Don't be that." My father, for a living, and I told Randy yesterday, and I think he thought I was joking. This is serious as a heart attack here. My father, for a living, did witchcraft and sorcery and black magic for 50 years. That was his trade. So as far as spirituality and religious things, that's what I grew up thinking. I grew up believing in spells and cursing somebody's homes and spirits, and that was my upbringing. And in some ways I envy you. I do. You've got, especially those of you who've got good parents, and you grew up in the Lord and doing godly things, because in a lot of ways I'm fighting against things I grew up in. But in some ways I don't, because I really appreciate what God has done for me. All these signs and miracles are supposed to help us appreciate who God is and what God has done for us. And in Mark chapter 5, which is the chapter we're going to study, we're going to see Jesus and some broken people. And I'm not emotional, I'm not an emotional person in the slightest. This chapter makes me a little emotional because I've been all 3 of these people in different points in my life. And what I want us to do as we study this chapter is I want us to just look at how Jesus interacts with people who are broken. And I want you to look at what the broken people do whenever they confront Jesus. I don't think that we typically study Mark 5 and combine these 3 stories, because they are very different people. But they are all in need of the same thing. They are all in need of Jesus, the Savior, the Son of God. And they are all in need of life. Mark chapter 5. They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. When he, being Jesus, got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, the shackles had been broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, gashing himself with stones. All right, let's stop here. So in Mark chapter 5, we're introduced to Jesus, and Jesus meets with the man. And I want you to notice, where is it that this guy comes out of? Before we get any details on the man himself, where does he come out of? the tombs. Let me ask you a question. What types of people live in tombs? What types of people live in tombs? Dead people. People who aren't alive. This is where this guy is running out of. And it's not like, because to me, like if anybody comes out of a tomb and comes running out of a tomb, that's creepy and scary enough for me. But this guy comes and he's running toward them. And it says that he has broken shackles in his hands. Why would someone need broken shackles? Why would someone have shackles on their hands, by the way? Because someone was trying to arrest him. Someone was trying to bind him up. Why do you try to bind somebody up? To keep them away from you. Here is somebody, I mean, to keep yourself safe and to keep them away from you. Here is somebody who, as far as the text is concerned, and later on we'll see, and they'll say that he was dressed in his right mind. He was naked, in shackles. You think of the idea in shackles. People were trying to bind him up, and they couldn't, and he was by himself. Coming from where the tombs were, from where dead people live. This is where he's coming out of. And he's running to Jesus. And it's not just that, but you're told that he would gash himself with stones. Ever met somebody who cut themselves? Hopefully you haven't. Hopefully it's not you. Why do people do that? A lot of times they're in pain and they're hurting. That's who this guy is in Mark 5. You have a man who is naked, running from tombs, a guy who caused other people pain. And apparently he was in these tombs and night and day crying out, probably because of his own pain, the pain he caused himself. That's who this guy is. So this guy runs up to Jesus. Right? You're Jesus, what do you do? Right? If it's me, you know what I do? I get back in the boat. Because that's not a person. That's a monster. Like that's not a man, that's a monster. Like that's what that guy looks like. That's what he seems like. He doesn't even seem real. Notice what Jesus does. And what Jesus does with broken people in this chapter here. And especially as we start off with this guy. Picking up in verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he says, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." For he had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." All right, stop there in verse 9. So Jesus now finally starts to interact with this guy, with this monster. And what does Jesus do? You notice what he does? He asks him a question. And the question is, what's your name? What types of people do you ask what their name is? People you want to know. This is the first point. As far as Jesus and broken people. And if you're here and you're broken and either you're hurting or you've been hurting somebody else, or you've been living among tombs, or Jesus sees the person and not the problem. Jesus ran up to this guy and what he asks him is, "What's your name?" Not what's your deal, what's wrong with you, why are you the way that you are, why do you have all those cuts on you, what's wrong with you, why do you think this way, why do you live this way? What's your name? Because there was a person underneath all that hurt. And you notice how the guy responds, or who responds? Who responds? The demons. It's like this guy doesn't even have control anymore. Where when he gets asked what your name is, the demons are the one responding. And they say, "Legion, for we are many." Let's see what Jesus does here. And notice a few other details in this story here. Verse 11, All right, let's pick up in verse 10. And he began to implore him earnestly not to send him out of the country. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they drowned in the sea. Then the herdsmen, let's just read to verse 20. Then the herdsmen ran away and reported it into the city and in the country, and the people came to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man that had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. Those who had seen it described it to them, how it had happened to the demon-possessed man, and all about the swine. And they began to implore Jesus to leave their region. So let's stop there in verse 17. So let's keep going. So you have this demon-possessed man, and the first thing Jesus does is that Jesus sees the person, not the problem. Or he sees the man, not the monster. And whenever we're broken, whenever we're hurting, and again, there's a lot of hurt that you can be going through that nobody knows about. Whenever that's you, understand that Jesus sees you and not the monster around you. So then, Jesus is going to, he's going to cast the demons out. And Jesus cast the demons into 2,000 swine. How many, does anybody here rate? By the way, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not from Alabama, so I don't know. That's legitimate. I don't know y'all in farm animals or whatever. Does anybody here own pigs? Okay. How many pigs do you have? 5 pigs. How much is a pig worth? I don't know. Just guesstimate it for me. It's $300. All right, so now imagine 2,000 pigs. It's a little more than $300. My math can be wrong, but it's about $60,000. And Jesus is completely content with 2,000 pigs dying, if it means one man gets to be saved. Because here's the second point about Jesus and broken people. Jesus values people over possessions. He values people over possessions. Again, he is completely fine with all these swine jumping off of a cliff because you know what? One man is now sane. One man now is not demon-possessed. Let me ask you. Right? Maybe you're not broken anymore. By the way, everybody has been broken at some point. But maybe you're not broken anymore. What about the people around you? Sometimes I've had relationships with people where because I didn't want to ruffle the feathers of that relationship, I didn't value them as a person, or I didn't value them as a soul. And I knew that they were hurting, I knew that they needed help, but I didn't want to mess up whatever relationship we had, or when I worked a secular job with my coworkers, I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. I didn't want to mess things up. I was valuing that physical possession, that physical relationship over their soul. It's not what Jesus is like. I don't think Jesus is yes, let's go kill pigs. I'm not sure that's what it was. But Jesus saw the value of a soul. That's what he does. Even when we're broken, he sees your value. And so he sends the swine into the pigs. The pigs go, they jump off the bank, the steep bank, they die. They go and they tell the herdsman, presumably the owner of these pigs. And now they come back and they see a few things. They see, first of all, the pigs are gone. And they see a guy who previously was demon-possessed. They would have known who he was. Now he's clothed in his right mind. And what do they ask Jesus to do? To leave. And picking up in verse 18. So verse 17. They began to implore him to leave their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, "Go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you. And now he has had mercy on you." And in verse 20 it says, "And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed." There's the next point here. They asked Jesus to leave. Did Jesus beg them that he might stay? No. Let me explain to you why I did what I did. No. Let me explain to you what I really meant by that. Is that what he does? This might be one of the scariest things to me in the Bible. They asked Jesus to go, and what does Jesus do? He gets in the boat, and he's leaving. He won't stay there. Jesus wants to help broken people, but he can't help broken people who don't want to be helped. But this is what he does. So the guy who had previously been demon-possessed, what does he want to do? He wants to go with him. Why do you think he might want to go with Jesus? What was that? Yeah, he just talked some demons out of me. This guy's pretty cool. See, that's a much better way of viewing it than I view it. I'm a little more skeptical. If he would have stayed in that city, you know who he would have had to be around? People he hurt. Imagine the places he ruined, the people he hurt. And he was going to have to keep looking at them. And every morning see them. You know what Jesus says? Stay here and tell people what God has done for you. Because the easy thing to do, if you've been broken and God has bound you up, the easy thing to do is leave and go somewhere where no one's known you. See, it's easy for me to come here and talk to you guys about the Lord because y'all don't know me. You know, like in some ways, you know some things about me, but you didn't know me when I was 13, 14, 15. You didn't know me when I was in high school or when I was in college and I was struggling with certain things. Y'all didn't know that. It's a lot harder to go back home and talk to the people who actually saw you and tell them what good things the Lord has done for you. That's what Jesus asked this guy to do. Because there's going to be some places where Kenny can't go. There's going to be some places where the elders here can't go. Wherever it is you go to church, there's going to be some people that they will have zero interactions with. But you will. And the easy thing to do is run away and not ever talk to the people who had saw you as broken. What the Lord is asking us to do is, now that you've been bound up, to go back to them and talk about the good things that God has done for you. That's a lot harder to do. That's what God is asking of us. It's interesting, later on in this gospel, Jesus will return to the Decapolis and everyone will swarm to him. We're not told why. My guess is, this is like my working hypothesis, my guess is because this guy did his job. He went and he just talked to people. And so whenever Jesus returned, everyone was wanting to hear about the Word of God. Which is just cool. But that's the first guy. So, guy number one, the first broken person, is the demon-possessed man. Someone who clearly looks broken. You know, like you see him, you would have seen him on the streets, and you knew that guy needs help. Jesus heals him. He binds him up. Let's look at the second person here, and we're going to skip a few verses because there's someone in between here. But starting in verse 25, we'll get person number 2 here. Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 25. It says, a woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse after hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garment, I will get well. Immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her afflictions. Immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that that power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around and in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And the disciples said, you see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came forward and fell down before him and told the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. All right, person number 2. Again, 3 different case studies here in Mark 5. Person number 1, the demon-possessed man. Guy who clearly looks broken. Who's the second person we're introduced to? Or I guess when you skip a person, but who's the second person we're talking about here? She's just a woman. And I think the way Mark is supposed to try to read is like she's just kind of a nobody. She's just a woman in a crowd. And so she seems unimportant. At least she seems that way. And she had a problem. She had a flow of blood. And we're not going to get into what all it was or wasn't. But she had a flow of blood, and what are we told about her infirmities? We're told two things. Okay, so I guess we're told three things. She had been sick for 12 years. I mean, that's a detail that he's telling us for the context of the chapter. But what other two things as far as her and trying to get better? It only ever got worse, and what else? No one could help her. In fact, it says she spent everything she had trying to get better, and in fact, she just got worse. You know people like that? See, the first guy, the demon-possessed man, kind of sort of, he might have been looking for some help, or maybe it was just the demons kind of reacted that way around Jesus. But this second lady, I mean, you talk about desperate for help. She is trying to get better. She realizes that she's sick, and she's at her point where she has spent everything she has trying to be better. You know people like that? Maybe this is you, I don't know. Broken. You spend everything you have, all your time, all your money, all your resources, trying to be better, trying to get better, trying to feel better, because you know you shouldn't feel the way that you do. You know that there is something wrong, and you don't want to be wrong anymore. And all these people you go to, instead of making you better, they just make it worse. And this lady thought, if I could just touch him, I'll be better. Which is interesting because she touches him, she gets better, and then Jesus is like, who touched me? And what do the disciples say? There's a ton of people around you. Jesus, why are you asking who touched you? Because there's a difference. There's a lot of people around Jesus, but not everybody got healed. Now, maybe not everybody was sick, but it's just a point, you can be around Jesus and stay broken. Why did she get better? Because she had faith. She believed, if I can get close enough to him, if I can touch him, he can heal me. Being around Jesus in the vicinity isn't enough. You've got to legitimately believe that God can bind up your brokenness. And so I'm trying to go quick here, but that's lady number 2. Is the lady with the flow of blood who had spent everything she had trying to be better, trying to feel better, trying to get out of the condition that she was in. All right, person number 3. Verse 21, so we skipped this, but verse 21. When Jesus had crossed over in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, so he stayed by the seashore. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and upon seeing him fell at his feet and implored him earnestly saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live. And he went off with him, and a large cloud following him and pressing in on him. That's then, verse 25 is when the story with the lady with the flow of blood. But now we've got this guy Jairus. And what's Jairus' problem? His daughter is sick. And that's like an understatement. His daughter's dying. Jairus is broken for a broken person. So I want you to notice, again, the 3 different kinds of people. We're going to finish the text here. I want you to notice the 3 different kinds of people. There's one guy who clearly looks broken. You know, the demon-possessed man, you would have seen him, you would have known, this guy's got some issues. He's broken. The second person, the woman, I mean, maybe you see that she's broken. Maybe if you talk to her that she's broken, but she's desperate and she's looking for something because she's been hurting for years. But again, she just kind of seems like just a person in the crowd. Then you also get Jairus, and Jairus is who? First of all, it tells you his name because people would have known who he was. What else do we know about Jairus? He's a ruler of a synagogue. He's an important person. You know, he's not a nobody. But he's broken because there's somebody that he cares about who's broken. And so maybe you may not be broken, but I'm sure everybody here has somebody that they care about and they love that's hurting. And it hurts you. And so he implores Jesus, he begs Jesus, come with us. So Jesus is on his way, he's going. In verse 35, it says, while he was still speaking, this is speaking to the woman who had the flow of blood. While he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official saying, Your daughter's died. But you can think about this. Man, Jesus, why'd you help this lady? Why'd you stop for this lady? If you would have just come to my house, my daughter would be okay. Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore? But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, don't be afraid any longer. Only do what? Only believe. Don't be afraid any longer, only believe. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the synagogue official and saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing. And entering in, he said to them, why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep. And notice how the people react, because again, in their minds, they can't fathom, this Jesus, he doesn't get it. This isn't in their minds. Verse 40, they began laughing at him. But putting them all out, he took the child's father and mother and companions and entered the room where the child was. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old, and immediately they were completely astounded. So the third story, you have Jairus, and his daughter was broken. Whenever you're broken for broken people, and you go to the Lord, and you try to bring the Lord to them, like the Lord can bind them up. In a sense, like help Jairus out. But you have three people who are all broken in different ways. And like maybe you're here and you're the demon-possessed man. And you're hurting other people. You need the Lord. Maybe you're here and you're that woman. And like you're desperately trying to be better and get better. And you're hurting. Maybe you're here and you're Jairus. And you're fine. But there's someone that you deeply care about and love who is hurting. All three of them needed the same Jesus. And all three of them did the exact same thing whenever they got before Jesus. Did you notice that? I purposefully glossed it over and didn't focus on it. You notice what all three of them do? I thought you had it for me. They all fall down before him. The demon-possessed man runs up to him, falls down before him. The woman, whenever her blood dries up, and Jesus is like, who touched me? And they fall down before him. Jairus, whenever he comes up to Jesus, he falls down before him. Because here's the thing, whenever you're broken, and you're in front of the Savior, the falling down before him is a recognition of your brokenness. It's a recognition of, I can't do this, and I need you to help with it. And what Jesus does is that he binds up broken people. Again, I'm here for a day and a half. I'm here for 2 days. I'm not going to be super deeply connected into your lives. I don't live here. I live somewhere else. But whatever it is you're going through, Jesus binds that up. You've got to go to him. You've got to talk to him. Whatever doubts you're having, whatever struggles you're having, whatever brokenness you have, go to him. Or maybe you're not broken anymore. Maybe you're okay. You think about my life, you're like, my life, it's actually not that bad. I'm pretty good. You know broken people. You got to talk about the one who bound you up when you were broken. These were just 4 separate stories of Jesus. Let Jesus transform you. Let him make you well. Let him give you sight. And let him bind you up. That's why he came. That's why the Messiah, the anointed one, that's why he was sent to do these things. You've got to let him do it. And the reason why he can do these things is because he is God. Because he is the Son of God. If we let him do these things in our lives, we will have eternal life. I want to thank y'all for, just the comments, the conversations afterwards, the singings. It's been really encouraging for me to be here and be with y'all. I appreciate y'all, even if I don't remember your names. I remember half of your names. But seriously, I appreciate y'all, and I appreciate y'all being out here. Keep seeking God. Keep learning more about who he is and what that means for you and in your life. So, thank you.